Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is the Hour of the Raven, your channel for everything Ravenloft, RPG, Dungeons and Dragons, and horror.
Today, we will uncover the secrets of Markovia, exploring the dark secrets that lurk in the wild and desolate landscapes. Before we begin, a few brief announcements and clarifications. On a sad note, I would like to pay a brief tribute to the great illustrator Stephen Fabian, who recently passed away. His artwork illustrated the first Ravenloft box set and several of its products, and helped us define the Ravenloft setting, as well as transport us to the dark land of the mists. I would also like to celebrate with you an achievement of the channel, which surpassed the 5,000 subscribers mark. The Hour of the Raven is not a large channel, but is made by a fan and to the fans of the Ravenloft settings, both old and new. May we continue our journey and exploration to the land of the mists for many years to come. Today we will explore the domain of Markovia, and we will expand our reference sources to address this domain. Our exploration through the mists in the core domains of Ravenloft generally cover domains that had already been featured in novels, adventures, and especially in the Ravenloft Gazetteers, books that provide detailed information about the domain and their dark lords. Up until now, I have been careful to present Ravenloft in my videos using official sources. However, in the case of Markovia and other domains not previously covered by the Ravenloft Gazetteers, I intend to expand on these sources of information. The domain of Markovia first appeared on the map of the Black Box, the Ravenloft Realm of Terror from 1990, but was drastically transformed by the events of the Grand Conjunction, which removed the domain from the Ravenloft core and inserted it into the Sea of Sorrows. After this drastic transformation, it was explored further in the events of the adventure Neither Man Nor Beast, and received some mentions in the Domains of Dread supplement and in the 3rd edition Ravenloft campaign setting. The domain would be covered in one of the 3rd edition Gazetteers, focused on the domains of the Sea of Sorrows, but unfortunately, White Wolf's license to release books for the setting came to an end, and these books were not written. The Ravenloft fan community wouldn't let the setting rot in oblivion. The Fraternity of Shadows website, the most well-known and organized sites for fans of the setting, has published netbooks that continue the Gazetteer's proposal, exploring in depth the domains of dread. Some of these books explore the Nocturnal Sea, the domain of Soaring, or the cluster of Zerisha, for example, and for some time now they are developing a gazetteer for the Sea of Sorrows. Although the Sea of Sorrows gazetteer is not yet finalized, some of its passages describing domains have already been previewed by their authors in Court of the Raven netbooks. In the video description, I will leave the link where you can download it. The next videos about Markovia will be based on the official material and the article about Markovia written by Michelle Adamis. The article on Markovia was published as a preview of the Sea of Sorrows Gazetteer, and it's possible that the final text will change when the Gazetteer is finally published. Are you ready? After being shipwrecked and stranded in Markovia, we find the hut of the researcher František Markov, who makes us an unusual proposal. If we go to the Monastery of Lost Souls and seek information about the location of an artifact known as the Table of Life, he would arrange for us to be transported on the ship of Captain Leonard, his business partner, whose ship will arrive in the next few days and could take us back to the mainland to Lamordia. Fearing that no other ship would approach this remote island, we find ourselves with no way out unless we accept this absurd proposal. We reach the monastery through a precarious lifting mechanism. In the central courtyard of the monastery, a single monk, covered in robes, awaits us and silently gestures for us to follow him to the monastery in complete darkness. In silence, he guides us to our rooms and leaves us without saying a word. This absurd situation leaves us frightened, but determined. We leave the rooms and search for clues and information until we find a dusty library where several tomes and scrolls are stored. On a table, an open tome appears to be the monk's last work, a report on the islands of Markovia and its most sinister secrets.
Power of the Raven.
Markovia is an unknown and unexplored land, which has intrigued those who dare to explore it. Since its emergence from the mists, many have questioned what lies hidden in its mostly uninhabited mountains and forests, and their primitive group of beastmen who dwell in this region. The mystery surrounding this region only became deeper after the Grand Conjunction, when these lands were swallowed by the mists and disappeared from the core, leaving behind only a huge crater of the Shadow Rift. Thrown in the Sea of Sorrows as a huge island, it became even more isolated amidst the misty sea, helping to hide and increase the secrets and mysteries of Markovia. The island is surrounded by reefs, corals, and rocks, and has an unstable climate, prone to storms, which makes it difficult for ships to approach it. However, the main reason why this region has been isolated from civilization for so long is due to the existence of a fearsome horror of the depths that hunt in its waters. A mythical sea monstrosity has made its home in the cavernous depths of its bay, the feared creature known as the Soul Kraken, responsible for bringing destruction and tragedy to many vessels that approach the island. The gigantic cephalopod monstrosity resembles a squid and has a translucent and phosphorescent body, capable of glowing or changing colors to camouflage in the waters. The magical beast has powerful resistance to mystical attacks, a great capacity for regeneration, and it's quite intelligent and perceptive in its behavior. When in danger, it can release a black dye in the water, which hides its presence and allows it to escape. Its most macabre and frightening characteristic is that it keeps humanoid heads at the tips of its tentacles, which can be fresh if recently removed from victims or become just skulls after the passage of time. The tip of its tentacles can manipulate the heads of these victims, having some kind of control over their faces, and some say that these heads can emit sounds and be used by the creature to communicate. Many speculate that this ability comes from the fact that the Soul Kraken not only devours the flesh of its victims, but also consumes their souls. Those who manage to escape this monstrosity and reach its shores will also face other danger and horrors. The most striking evidence of these dangers is the numerous ruined settlements that can now be found scattered across the island. To the north of the island, 3 ruined villages can be found. They are the result of attempts to colonize these desolate lands by Gehenna. During the Huskat Inquisition, many of the mongrels of Gehenna were massacred and chose to flee to survive. Their deformed appearance made them outcasts whenever they went, but the desolation of Markovia seemed perfect for a new beginning, and they created the village of Nozuka. Rumors of this settlement of mongrels reached the inquisitors of Zakata, and an armed wing of soldiers was sent to destroy this settlement. This army that invaded Markovia did not easily locate the target of their mission, and after suffering casualties and attacks by beastmen, they also created their own military settlement, the Hasbunar camp. For months, these 2 settlements waged a small war, until During the conflict, they were overwhelmed by a large number of beastmen under the orders of desolate, and most were captured to be used in his sinister experiments. Reports say that the few surviving mongrels from this conflict formed a third settlement, the community of Markovia, which survived, hidden in the mountains, until after the Grand Conjunction. But this settlement was also swept away by the rebel forces of Akanga, who forced its inhabitants to join their cause or be destroyed. The ruins, marked by strange statuettes and symbols of the Zakata deity, are now occupied by a few beastmen, perhaps remnants of the soldiers and mongrels from these conflicts, who, in a primitive way, try to replicate the worship of the Zakata faith. Another settlement in these lands is the Piatravin Mansion, which lies near the old border with Borca and Dorvinia. There lies an abandoned mansion owned by a noble family of Borca, the Caruso. This family acted as treasuries for Borca and the infamous Camille de Lisnia, and squandered many resources. These nobles took advantage of the newly discovered lands of Markovia to claim part of them as their own and build a summer estate there. In the early years of this domain, Markovia was mostly uninhabited, and the construction was successful. Rumor has it that they embezzled Camille's resources, and the political intrigues of that kingdom caused the family to take refuge in Markovia, fearing Camille de Lisnia's revenge. Although the family sought safety in the remote location, such measures were not enough, and Camille's revenge reached the Carusos, with all its members dying of poison in a tragic incident. Today, the ruined mansion is avoided by the beastmen, and it is said to be haunted by the Caruso family patriarch. Some, however, believe that this mansion still holds the secret of the Carusos and the location of a vast treasure stolen from Camille de Lisnia. Another settlement that enjoyed a certain infamy was Atzvogreg, which was established by smugglers from Nova Vasa shortly after the unveiling of Markovia, and soon became a den of crime. During the period in which it was active, the place was used by a band of criminals and served as a base for hiding loot, shady dealings, illicit games, and even for the sale of captured slaves. The group of criminals began to grow in boldness and also received fugitives from Barovia, who sought to escape the yoke of Count Strahd. This settlement was destroyed after being surrounded by forces from Nova Vasa and Barovia, who after a brief siege managed to invade and exterminate its inhabitants, making an example of the criminals. Perhaps the most macabre settlement surrounded by mysteries is the ruins of Zolotoi. This settlement was created by an initiative of the Nova Vasa government to try to exploit the mineral veins of the Markovian mountains. Several settlers were sent to this settlement to begin this endeavor, encouraged by the chance of riches, but they became a target of attacks by the beastmen, who ended up capturing its population to become victims for desolate experiments. The village remained in ruins and abandoned until shortly before the Grand Conjunction, when a group of settlers from Tibest decided to settle in these ruins. Organized and devout in their faith, they reinforced the walls and managed to defend from the attacks of the beastmen, prospering in the region. When the events of the Grand Conjunction occurred, and Markovia was engulfed in the mists, the sudden isolation led the fanatical religious population to a steady increase in violence and paranoia. Between hysteria, fear, and religious awe, the population lost itself in an inquisition and internal conflicts, to find out who had conspired with fairy beings and imperial spirits to bring such a curse upon the community. They ended up decimating each other in an outbreak of violence. When the village was rediscovered, only the bones of the population were found in the streets, indicating its violent fate. The outburst of violence may have been stimulated by the presence of a reddish fungus, which proliferated with the hot climate that now plagued Markovia, and whose spores led to a state of hallucination and violence. After years of abandonment, the village was once again occupied. When Markovia had already become an island, a Lamordian expedition attempted to colonize the island, and the expedition occupied and settled the ruins of this village. They reinforced the defense against the beastmen, but these colonists also began to suffer from strange diseases. In addition to suffering from the fungi spores and hallucination, which heightened their emotions and violence, there was a creature of darkness among these settlers, a Penangalan vampire, who stalked and murdered their residents. Between attacks by the beastmen and Penangalan, the village was destroyed once more, and its ruins now shelters the undead horror that feeds on the creatures of Markovia and hunt in its jungle. There is still another group of supernatural creatures that had settled in Markovia and that became isolated after the Grand Conjunction. A murder of were-ravens that belonged to the secret society of the Keepers of the Black Feather had made Markovia their secret refuge, far from the reach of their great enemy, Count Strahd. When Markovia was swallowed by mists in the Grand Conjunction, these were-ravens were trapped in the island, far away from Barovia. These creatures have already discovered the truth about the Osenblatt and his terrible experiments, and remain most of the time transformed into ravens to avoid attracting the attention of the Dark Lord of these lands. After their leader attempted to fly to a new destination and disappeared in the Sea of Sorrows, they gave up on venturing out into the waters and seemed to be growing increasingly savage on this isolated island, spending most of their time in their animal form. The greatest and most sinister mystery surrounding this island is the real identity of the mysterious Osenblatt, the Master of Pain, the sinister deity worshipped by most of the beastmen. For a long time, the Broken Ones, part man and part animal, were united and organized in their faith of the Osenblatt. In their primitive religion, they believed a supreme entity had created the universe and other gods from the mists of the cosmos. However, one of the lesser gods, the Osenblatt, decided to create life, populating the inanimate world created by the supreme entity. The creator god, envious of the Osenblatt's beautiful creations, cursed him to have a bestial and mutable form, and decided to destroy his creations, ordering the other gods to tear up these lands and sink them into the ocean. Only through the intervention of the Osenblatt, the god who walks among us, these lands were saved, and the treacherous gods were transformed into stone, into the great humanoid statues that today stand on its beaches. The sinister truth is that the Osenblatt, the Master of Pain, is no deity at all, but the sinister Dark Lord of the region. He is František Markov, a cursed and obsessed man who performs grotesque surgical experiments in which he mixes human and animal victims. He is the creator of the grotesque Broken Ones or Beastmen, in a process so violent and painful that it ends up completely destroying the minds of his victims. These beastmen, brazen and without memory, are then inserted into this bizarre religious cult in which Diosanblad poses as a divine figure, the creator and the master of pain. In his madness, he urges his grotesque creation to become more human. In his relentless quest to create a supreme creature, the perfect blend of man and animal. František Markov's madness and obsession began while he was still a butcher in Barovia, when he began to perform bizarre surgical experiments on pigs. When his wife discovered his grotesque habits, she became one of his victims, and for days she was subjected to surgeries without anesthesia, which sought to merge her body with the body of pigs. His sinister and cruel acts attracted the attention of the Dark Powers, and when he entered the mist to escape a maddened mob, he was granted the desolate lands of Markovia, becoming the Dark Lord of this domain. The ghost of his wife Ludmila still haunts him and the lands of Markovia. She is unable to manifest in human form and appears like a shapeless mist. She can cause an aura of despair and invade the dreams of others, in which she warns the unwary of Markov's true nature. This apparition is called the Swine Queen, as she is able to possess the bodies of wild pigs and boars, and uses these beasts to cause destruction and disrupt František Markov's plans. Although the Beastman once lived under the rule of Diosanblad, recently a rebellion dared to challenge his power and divine status and promoted a revolution on the island. The leader of this revolution is Akanga, perhaps the most successful beastman created by František Markov, but also his greatest rival. Although he has no memory of his past, Akanga was once a man called Arkan Ganescu, who lived in the desolate lands of Gehenna. He lost everything to the Zakata theocracy and became a rebel, losing his faith in humanity and the gods, believing that all religion is nothing more than a form of manipulation. Arkan fled Gehenna and arrived in Markovia, and saw in the simple and primitive life of the Beastman a purer and more natural life. Upon realizing that they were being manipulated by Diosanblad, who preached that it was a sin for the Beastmen to give in to their animalistic instincts, he dared to interrupt one of their religious rituals and accused Diosanblad of being a fraud. Arkan ended up on František Markov's operating table, and after the painful surgical procedure, he was merged with a specimen of a lion. His transformation destroyed his human memories, but he retained his revolt and rebellion, as well as his hatred of Diosanblad and religion. Gifted with great intelligence, he started a movement to discredit Diosanblad and to reunite the Beastmen under his leadership in the Akanga army. His rebellion culminated in great violence when he attacked Markov's hut and captured him, subjecting him to torture for a long period. František was tied to the Table of Life, an artifact recently stolen from the Monastery of Lost Souls, and tortured for months. Markov's madness and suffering ended up affecting the Beastmen who inhabited the island, as if the minds of the Beastmen was also mystically influenced by the Dark Lord's desire to have intelligent and civilized creatures around him. Many Beastmen have reverted to more animalistic and primitive behavior, including Akanga, who abandoned his human desires to torture his enemy and returned to the forest, leaving Markov on the table. Gradually, Akanga and the other Beastmen have regained back some of their human mentality, and Akanga has returned to his ambitions. He claims to be the new ruler of the island, and gather most of the organized Beastmen under his command. He leads the Akanga army, but has corrupted his principles for his human ambition, as he has been using the same strategies of domination as František Markov, claiming to have divine status among his followers. He has mastered the knowledge to make fire, and he subjugates several tribes of beastmen with this knowledge, and many depend on him to keep the pyres burning in their communities. The effect of the Akanga rebellion were the dissolution of any unity among the beastmen. Ever returning to an even more primitive state, they now organize themselves into tribes and smaller groups. Most groups of beastmen, called pharaohs, gathered in tribes and small groups by phenotype or affinity, usually led by the strongest. When František Markov escaped the table where he was being tortured, it took him a while to recover from his injury and madness and regain control. Little by little, he rebuilt his mansion hut and created and recruited new beastmen who were loyal and faithful to the Ossenblatt. The group that gathers around his hut, now formed mainly by beastmen made from dogs, are those who inhabited and occupied the farm. Another group composed mainly of beastmen of the Canidae group is the Pack. This group is led by a werewolf from Verbrugge, who became isolated and imprisoned in Markovia, and who gathered these beastmen made from wolves, dogs, and jackals, propagating the belief in lupine superiority and the fate of the wolf god. The vermin are beastmen made from rodents, and these creatures inhabit several caves and nooks on the island. They are known for pillaging and robbing, and for trading the fruits of their plunder through barter. The surf dancers are beastmen created from marine animals, such as walrus, seals, and sea lions, and who inhabit the coast of Markovia. This beastman seems less primitive than their companions, and follows a different religious trend, worshipping Delphi, a beast woman who managed to escape Markov's yoke. Delphi was created from a mix with a dolphin, and was one of the civilized broken ones who lived with Markov in his mansion. After the Akanga rebellion, she escaped these horrors and threw herself into the sea, fleeing from Markovia. Hell worshippers portray her as a saint and say that because of her purity, she was transformed into a dolphin. The worship of these creatures, though well-intentioned, may be about to unleash a great horror. These beastmen have found a preserved corpse of a mermaid, and some believe it is Delphi, paying homage to her. Their worship of this corpse may soon transform this body into a mummy, creating a serious threat to prey on the coast of Markovia. Some beastmen are being created or directed by Markov to work on the old mines that have been exploited by settlers. The fruits of this beastman's labor are traded to Captain Leonard Gartner, the intrepid captain of the Howling Walrus. This captain has managed to establish a safe road to Markovia and struck a deal with Markov to trade the extracted minerals. In exchange, he provides Markov with part of the profits, but especially with new and exotic animals and prisoners for his experiments. Captain Leonard is actually a rare type of lycanthrope, a sea wolf, a mix of wolf, seal, and human. With a violent past, he has risen to captain of the ship and maintains a dual personality. In Lamordia, he is a renowned captain who has secured a safe route to Markovia and profits from the extraction of minerals. However, he also attacks and destroys potential competitors, spreading the fame of the pirate of the ship known as the Sea Hound, in which he captures slaves to supply Markov for his experiments. No exploration of the secrets of Markovia would be complete, however, without exploring the mysterious monasteries of the Order of the Guardians that settle in the region. One of the monasteries, now in ruins, guarded the artifact known as the Tapestry of Dark Souls. The Tapestry of Dark Souls is an artifact created in the Nightmare Lands, capable of imprisoning the souls of evil beings, but also exerting a corrupting influence. The presence of the tapestry amplified negative emotions and awakened the darkest desires of those around it, and only the most obstinate and pious monks could be its guardians. The artifact also attracted and aroused greed, as if stimulating evil within and then capturing those who succumb to evil. Many wished to obtain such artifact to try to control and free the power of these imprisoned profane souls. The discovery of this artifact attracted the greed of the necromancer Morgoth, who attempted to capture and free the evil forces that were imprisoned in the tapestry. His attempt was thwarted by the guardian monks, who imprisoned him in the tapestry, but this attack decimated the monastic order, leaving only 3 survivors. These remaining monks then decided to move the headquarters of the order's monastery to the remote and wild lands of Markovia, recently unveiled by the mists, in the hope of keeping the dangerous tapestry of souls protected and hidden. This new monastery was not enough to contain the darkness that was imprisoned within the tapestry. Even imprisoned, Morgoth managed to corrupt the people around him, and even fathered a son, whom he deceived and corrupted until he was freed. The evil forces of the tapestry had transformed Morgoth into a vampire, and after he escaped, he preyed on the blood until he regained his strength. When he recovered, he led an attack of undead and other creatures of the night against the monastery, decimating and destroying the monks. Tragedy befell this monastery, but the monks lured Morgoth into a trap, sacrificing themselves, and managed to destroy Morgoth and the tapestry. Today, the monastery lies in ruins, but the evil energies released by the destruction of the tapestry attracted a dangerous plant to the site. A yellowish vine covered the entire temple, and this murderous plant imprisons and suffocates any life form that approaches it. Many report that some of its victims become zombies that roam the monastery grounds, as if guarding and protecting the monastery. The other monastery, founded by the Order of the Guardians, is the Monastery of Lost Souls, which was founded with the aim of protecting an important artifact, the Table of Life. This monastery is located high in the mountains and can only be accessed by a secret trail or through a lifting mechanism on a rocky cliff. The Table of Life is a powerful greenish stone slab that emanates positive and regenerative energies. A creature placed upon this tablet is preserved, being immune to hunger and thirst, to any type of poison, and even to the most violent wound. This effect does not prevent any sensation of hunger, thirst, or pain, and someone kept alive in extreme conditions can easily lose their sanity. Once a person steps off the Table of Life, these effects will immediately cease unless they have been reversed. These artifacts is surrounded by dark legends. Some say that an old scholar and sage remained on the top of the table for more than 50 years, refusing to leave and receiving his meals on it, until an earthquake knocked him off and his body disintegrated, turning into a pile of bones. Another legend claimed that this artifact remained in the possession of a cruel pasha, who used the table for court entertainment, causing injuries and grotesque tortures to prisoners tied to the table. After years of cruelty, the population rebelled and imprisoned the monarch on the table, where he was slowly tortured and murdered for several years. This artifact was found by beastmen sent by Francesc Markov and taken from an ancient royal catacomb in Nova Vaza. Rumors say that it was used by an undead to create mummified ancient dead. The beastmen recovered the artifact and intended to take it to Markovia, but were attacked and robbed by thieves near the border. The artifact followed a tortuous path until it ended up in the hands of one of the members of the Order of the Guardians, who founded the Monastery of Lost Souls to guard this artifact. For decades, the monastery kept the artifact protected. However, after the Grand Conjunction, a group of adventurers shipwrecked on this island were induced by Franciszek Markov to recover the Table of Life and managed to reach the monastery and steal the artifact from the monks. This event coincided with the outbreak of the Akanga Rebellion. Markov wanted to obtain the Table of Life for his experiments, but ended up being tortured by Akanga with these artifacts for months. Markov finally managed to escape from the table, but during the time he went away to recover from his injuries, the table disappeared. The monks have many theories about the Table of Life and its whereabouts. Some distant rumors say that it escaped from the island and is in the possession of the path of the Iron Fate of Hazlan, while others claim that it is in the possession of the scientist Emil Bollenbach and was used to create the bizarre experiment of the Golem doppelganger. Most monks believe that the true whereabouts of the table are known only by Felix, a feline-looking beastman who is said to have betrayed Markov and later Akanga, and who might have stolen it and now holds the truth about the real whereabouts of the artifact. The Order of the Guardian is seeking to recover this artifact, but they have also been transformed by their long proximity of its presence. The mystical energies that emanated from the Table of Life exert an influence on the bodies of those who guard it, and transformed them into undead. The monks are now mummies, with mystically preserved bodies, and most of them can even communicate. As we read the monk's green tale, we realize that we are deep within the dark abandoned monastery, reading ancient tomes by candlelight, and probably surrounded by the undead. A scraping sound comes from the darkness as a macabre figure in robes approaches. It seems to struggle to speak and beg us, "Help us rescue the Table of Life." When the candlelight reveals its cadaverous face, we are startled and prepare to flee. We quickly grab the book we are reading and flee through the corridors. In a short time, we realize that we are surrounded by undead monks, who whisper sinister pleas for help in retrieving their artifact. In a panic, we manage to escape the monastery tunnels and reach the central courtyard. We quickly run to the lifting mechanism and pull the levers to begin the slow descent away from the undead creatures. During our slow descent, we can see the landscape of the island from an altitude, and we see a ship anchored on the coast. Could this be the Howling Walrus, owned by the infamous Captain Leonard? Knowing that this may be our only chance to escape, we march to the jungles towards the ship. Near the coast, we find a camp of sailors, preparing crates to be taken to the ship. At night, taking advantage of the sailors' inattention and drunk state, we open a large chest and hide inside it to be taken as stowaways to the ship. After being abandoned in the cargo hold, we escape from the large crate and await for this ship to finally begin its journey. While we wait, we find a small source of light to finish reading the monk's notes, with a sinister account of the past of the cruel Franciszek Markov. Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and in the next video we will explore the past and sinister secrets of Franciszek Markov.